My name is Maria Norman, and I'm an artist, filmmaker, drag performer, costume maker, priestess of nature, and independent researcher. I research subjects and persons from the art, dance, and entertainment world of the so called La Belle Époque, the time span roughly between the years 1871 and 1914. This is part of a series of presentations where I look at Toulouse-Lautrec works in the collections of Scandinavian art museums. This time, I look at the collection of Nationalmuseum, the National Museum in Stockholm, Sweden. They hosted a Toulouse-Lautrec exhibition in 2007, which I saw, and it was really nice. In fact, I still have the shopping bag. Toulouse-Lautrec was a French artist who was active from around 1880 until his death in 1901. One reason why we find so many of his works in the collections of art museums around the world is that he was a very prolific graphic artist and that his posters and prints were widely distributed. They have gone in and out of fashion in various iterations since his death. First, in around 1920 to 1930s, when there was a nostalgia for turn of the past century. And thereafter, in 1970, they were very much looking back to like Victorian, Edwardian, La Belle Époquean things, such as his posters and bohemian style. And I would claim that the early 2000s had a Toulouse-Lautrec peak as well. After the release of the Moulin Rouge movie in 2001, it at least influenced fashion. My knowledge of Toulouse-Lautrec, of his friends and his era, comes from studying him, his friends, and his era for the past 23 years, since I was 15 years old. You do the math. I've been making art connected to his friend Jane Avril for the past 23 years, as well as having accumulated a great deal of sources such as books and archival material, online and on site in archives in Paris. And by the way, I've also performed the can-can. The collection of Nationalmuseum has 43 Toulouse-Lautrec listings, everything from drawings, posters, and prints, depicting the Moulin Rouge, celebrities, the seaside, and turkeys. Let's have a look. Let's start with turkeys, actually, because that can seem random or unexpected to some, but we who know Toulouse-Lautrec knows that he loved animals. These are likely made at when he was visiting his family estate. I'm guessing at the castle Malromé, east of Bordeaux. He would leave Paris some periods every year and go on trips to visit friends or family. Here's a famous one. The info on the museum's site says, "This poster shows the can-can dancers of La Troupe de Mademoiselle Églantine. From the left, Jane Avril, Cleopatra, Églantine, and Gazelle. They are all wearing the obligatory black stockings that made the legs contrast more sharply against the white petticoats when doing the can-can." Toulouse-Lautrec was commissioned to make the poster by his friend Jane Avril, famous from the Moulin Rouge, for the troupe's performance at Palais Theatre in London in 1896. Avril requested him to leave out the name of the establishment so they could use the poster for more than one show. That's correct. Aside from the row of ladies is in fact Cleopatra to the far right and Gazelle between Jane and Églantine. And black stockings were standard, but there were some exceptions, as can be seen in this photo of these gorgeous stockings, and in this detail from a Toulouse-Lautrec painting where a woman wears red stockings. And the yellow color of this poster, it connoted something risque and potentially provocative. And here's a photo of the troupe, a photo which Toulouse-Lautrec based his poster on. He sometimes used photos as base for his works. Some brief info on the ladies of this troupe. Jane Avril is someone we will get back to. She was one of his favorite models and a friend. Gazelle had taken lessons, can-can lessons, with a fellow dancer, just like Eglantine, whose nickname means wild rose. And there's almost no info on Cleopatra, but her name is a nod to the Egyptian queen. And when they performed together in London, there's said to have been a quarrel between Gazelle and Cleopatra, and that the two of them went for Jane Avril and Eglantine. The quarrel is said to be because of jealousy, because, Gazelle and Cleopatra were less experienced dancers, and this quarrel had to be handled by the manager of Palace Theatre. The rope dancer. This one has a special backstory. Toulouse-Lautrec made it from memory while he was in a mental institution. He had been sent there early in the year 1899 after an attack of alcohol-induced delirium, a state which causes severe confusion. This was brought on not only from his tremendous alcohol intake, but a combo of the fact that he was also syphilitic. At the time, loss of memory was believed to be one of the symptoms, so in order to get admitted from the clinic, he made several works from memory. Like this scene, where a rope dancer gets ready to balance the ropes. It could depict an occasion in 1897, where at the venue Jardin de Paris on Champs-Élysées, where a rope dancer performed alongside the trees. Here's a text from the webpage of Nationalmuseum. This rather plain study is a fine example of the keen eye with which Toulouse-Lautrec was able to capture characteristic features. The subtle details convey the image of a brothel madam. What could be termed as scribbling thus appears as an almost monumental portrait of a character. End quote. I'm guessing that this one was made between 1894 and 1896, as he depicted women from brothels most frequently around those years. Here's another example of Toulouse-Lautrec depiction of a madam and the mister. Notice the lapdog. Sometimes Toulouse-Lautrec portrayed animals with more care than the humans. And the madams were often former sex workers, and they had their workers follow a strict schedule and an almost prison or military-like regimen. At the Moulin Rouge, rude, a true rude. According to the biographer Henri Perruchot, in this picture, Toulouse-Lautrec is ironically drawing his father sitting at a table on the promenade at the Moulin Rouge. Toulouse-Lautrec's father did occasionally move in the same circles as his son, and their relation was strained because Count Alphonse de Toulouse-Lautrec Montfort was a rather deadbeat dad who was more interested in his eccentricities than his own son. It's debated as to what rude, a true rude, means. But there was a French sculptor named Rude, or Rude. So the meaning could be that Toulouse-Lautrec thought his dad looked like one of Rude's sculptures. That's the face of a true Rude, or Rude. This is an explanation which I personally find hilarious and quite fitting. But une rude could also be slang for a glass of red wine. So whatever rude or rude actually meant, the image is poking fun at Toulouse-Lautrec's old man. This work depicts a chimney sweep, ramoneur in French, at the end of a workday. This image was used as a cover for the song Christmas ballad, Ballade de Noël. The music was made by Toulouse-Lautrec's friend Désiré Dihot, who was from a family of musicians. They also collected art, and they knew Toulouse-Lautrec's idol, Degas. The Dihot family actually arranged so the two of them could meet. Here we are again at the Moulin Rouge, the cabaret in Montmartre, which is forever linked with Toulouse-Lautrec. It was his favorite venue and featured some of his favorite performers, like the depicted La Goulue with her back to us. Her nickname, the glutton, also alludes to her immense appetite for life, for sex, for food. But it might, in fact, have been an effect of growing up poor. A text from the webpage of Nationalmuseum. Louise Weber grew up poor in Paris. She worked as a laundress and an artist's model before she was discovered as a dancer. She made a breakthrough at the Moulin Rouge under the stage name La Goulue, the glutton. Toulouse-Lautrec's picture of her and her sister is a stylized snapshot. The sister appears as coarse and vulgar. La Goulue was critical of the picture, originally an oil painting which hung at the Moulin Rouge. It was taken down at her request. It's not known if she knew of this lithograph. Well, all of this is true, except her breakthrough wasn't at the Moulin Rouge. She was already quite well known as a dancer when it opened in 1889. This is the painting which was hung at the Moulin and which she did not like. But I'm not sure if she had it taken down though. And the painting and the lithograph does depict her actual sister and dresser, Victorine, and not the fellow dancer and possible lover, Môme Fromage, as often assumed. Other things in this picture, it depicts the promenade, the yellow fence-like structure, which was the hangout area with tables which were on both sides of the Moulin Rouge ballroom. It was an excellent spot for people watching as well as drinking. This detail has been identified as Jane Avril with a black hat and a lady wearing a cravat and a trilby-like hat, masculine coded fashion of many of Montmartre's lesbians. This lithograph depicts a sleepless man who views the crescent moon. It's not known who modeled for it. And the image was used as a cover for this publication, Poetry with Music by Toulouse-Lautrec's friend Désirée Diho. May Milton. She was an English dancer and singer who was the inseparable friend of Jane Avril. Rumor and qualified speculation have them as lovers. I believe it was Jane Avril who requested this poster for her friend to help promote her. It didn't go very well, as May faded into obscurity very quickly. There does exist one photograph of her, but almost no other info. Rumor has it that she was the lover of another subject of Toulouse-Lautrec, Irish singer May Belfort. Toulouse-Lautrec made a poster for May Belfort as well, and since he knew that there was something going on between them, he did the posters in the complementary colors blue and red. He explained this choice by saying, so that the ink splatters get married too. The young Pablo Picasso was such a huge fan of Toulouse-Lautrec that he placed his poster of May Milton in the background of this painting, The Blue Room. This painting in particular doesn't show just how influenced or inspired Picasso was by Toulouse-Lautrec, but there are other works of his which are, so inspired that they border on copies. This is a drawing of the actor Jean Monnet Sully in the play Antigone at Comédie Française. Toulouse-Lautrec's friend Romain Coulous got him interested / obsessed with theatre motifs. This is a scene from the play En Fallit, The Bankrupt, by Norwegian writer Bjørnstjerne Bjørnson. The scene in question is a key scene where the banker Berent, played by Jemier, nails down the conman Kjelde, played by Antoine. And aside from Bjørnson, they were also placed by fellow Norwegian Ibsen, being played in Paris at this time. Here's another of Désirée Diho's musical pieces, The Old Butterflies. This song or poem is about two elderly persons who are lovers. And it looks like the old man is groping the older woman's breasts. In 1895, Toulouse-Lautrec went on a cruise from Le Havre to Bordeaux. On it, he took the task of rather obsessively cooking different dinners for the few guests and the crew. And while in Bordeaux, he suddenly spotted a woman, the passenger from cabin number 54, and he became obsessed with her. She was the wife of a colonial civil servant who was stationed in Senegal, and she was headed there. Toulouse-Lautrec made advances and wanted to follow her to Senegal, but his friends were able to stop him from following her. Toulouse-Lautrec disembarked in Lisbon, and he made the work for the Salon de Sang, an international group of 100 artists who sold their prints collectively at the monthly exhibitions in Paris. His friend, the hobby photographer Maurice Guibert, was with him on this cruise, and I do remember seeing a photo of a similar scene, which Toulouse-Lautrec used for his work, but I can't seem to find it. La Revue Blanche, which was a periodical paper which promoted art by the Nabi group. This image served as a cover for one of the issues, and the depicted lady is Missia Nathanson. She was not very happy with how Toulouse-Lautrec depicted her and asked him, "Why do you make women so ugly?" He replied, "Because they are." He liked to tease. He obviously did not think women were ugly, as he would often develop obsessions rooted in partially the individual beauty of the lady in question. Missia was from Russia, from the St. Petersburg area, and she had a mixed heritage, like a Polish father and a French-Belgian mother. She was married to her cousin, the publisher for La Revue Blanche, Thaddée Nathanson, and they regularly held artistic salons in their home. Sometimes Toulouse-Lautrec served as the devoted bartender at their salons. And no, actually, in fact, he did not drink when he took on such tasks. He is reported as being the only sober person at the end of such nights. Missia divorced Thaddée, and she remarried twice. In her last marriage, she for some time lived in a ménage à trois with her husband and his mistress. She continued to be a patron for the artists and hosted artistic salons for decades. Missia served as the inspiration for two of the characters in Marcel Proust's work In Search of Times Past. From the Nationalmuseum website. The poster depicts the English racing cyclist Michael on his way across the finish line, where a man is standing and taking care of the timing. The poster was intended as advertising for the bicycle chain manufacturer La Chaîne Simpson, but it was rejected by the client. End quote. Biker Michael was in fact Welsh, but he rode for the English Simpson Chain Company. He was successful, but he lost money and suffered a head injury. After self-medicating with alcohol, Michael died at age 27 from delirium tremens. The previous design was rejected, but this one was accepted. La Chaîne Simpson, the Simpson chain, a new bike chain pictured above. It had just been invented, and this zigzaggy chain gives the bike as much power as that of a tandem bike. At least if we trust this advertising. Biker Michael is about to bike past the two people on the tandem. And Toulouse-Lautrec had been introduced to bicycling races by his friend Tristan Bernard. And he loved the speed and he loved to watch physical activity. He didn't care so much for the result of the races. Adieu Barcarolle. Barcarolle is the traditional songs of Venetian gondoliers. This image is another Diho with Jean Richepin, like a song cover. And is it just me, or does this woman look a bit like the one that Toulouse-Lautrec obsessed over on the Bordeaux cruise? It's from the same year as the one of her, so it could be possible that this is also her. Speaking of obsessions, bordering on or downright creepy ones, Toulouse-Lautrec's passion for this woman, Marcel Lender, was a bit odd, I must say. He went to see her in a play 20 times, and when asked why, he said, "To admire Lender's back. You will seldom see anything so magnificent. Lender's back is elaborate." Toulouse-Lautrec went with his friend to have supper in a cafe that she frequented, and he sat opposite her and embarrassed her with his hostile, compliment-ridden manner. And he also told jokes and dirty stories. And Toulouse-Lautrec did at one time send her flowers and asked for a special meeting. And after lunching together, he joined her in her dressing room. No details tells what went down, but after the meeting, he resumed his front row seat, from which he had his eyes fixed on her. Lender didn't appreciate his art and found him a horrible man. Here's a classic. Aristide Bruant at his cabaret. The Nationalmuseum website says, Aristide Bruant was one of the most famous entertainers in Paris in the late 1800s. In 1885, he opened Le Mirliton, a cabaret where he himself performed. His songs were about poverty, prostitutes, and tramps. The lyrics often criticized society. Toulouse-Lautrec made a whole series of posters for Bruant. This one was made for his appearance at Le Ambassadeur. It is a stylized picture that captures the singer's figure in a few lines and colors. Bruant's proletarian style is emphasized by the silhouette of a worker or sailor in the background. The text is correct. He opened his cabaret Le Mirliton, which is a military instrument, in 1885. On the first night, business was slow and the show was not a success. He felt pressured as he had invested all his savings, and he lost his temper and he started to bark insults at the persons who were present. The next evening they returned and brought their friends. They wanted to be insulted by Bruant. He was one of the first so-called insult comedians. And Toulouse-Lautrec loved his unconventional humor, and he soon became friends with Bruant. He made works depicted were inspired by and named after his songs. And the songs depicted working class neighborhoods such as Grenelle. This is the painting Toulouse-Lautrec made for the song In Grenelle. The song is from the vantage point of an aged sex worker, and its first two verses goes like this. When I see 17-year-old girls, it makes me think that a long time ago, I too was a virgin, in Grenelle. But it's a neighborhood full of soldiers. We meet them every step of the way. Day and night I act as sentinel, in Grenelle. And so the French word for virgin is pucelle, which rhymes with Grenelle. Here's another work from the museum's collection, which also depicts Bruant. He felt sympathy and affinity for the working class and the poor that he wrote about in his songs and poems, because he had been one. He felt true contempt for the bourgeois and the upper classes who went slumming in Montmartre. So when he insulted them and called them bastards, he meant it. Toulouse-Lautrec, who was an aristocrat, could depict the working class with a sincerity, but never felt or could feel real compassion for them. Here's a good example of that. This is the cover for his lithograph series L, meaning feminine form of them. This collection includes some very sincere depictions of women working in brothels, women whom Toulouse-Lautrec became friends with as well as their client. He could, of course, not understand their situation. He never needed to work for money in his life. It's often repeated, by me, for example, that Toulouse-Lautrec was friends with sex workers and he treated them differently than their other clients did, and that his disability made him an outcast in his aristocratic milieu, so he made friends with other outcasts in bohemian circles. This is true, yet he was always, of course, above many of his friends in status, because, as I said, he never had to work for money in his life. And Toulouse-Lautrec's family never ostracized him. They just wanted a different life for him. And regarding the women, all men were above them in status. Women were legal minors. A scene from the Moulin Rouge, which, according to Nationalmuseum website, features the singer Artistide Bruant, but I don't see him. I do see floaty white spots in the background, and they represent the lamps of the Moulin Rouge. They were an attraction in itself, because they were illuminated with something which was a novelty of this time: electricity. Here's a photo featuring the lamps. And the occasion depicted was a gala held at the Moulin Rouge in the autumn of 1893 to celebrate the Franco-Russian alliance, which had been agreed on in mid-July of the same year. And Aristide Bruant wrote the song Vive la Russie for this occasion. And the clothing that these two are sporting is referencing Russia. The aim of the alliance in question was mutual military aid between the countries in case of a German attack. The alliance lasted until 1917. Our two gala attendees are also featured in this work, where Toulouse-Lautrec depicts the same occasion. But more on that work in another presentation, when I present the Scandinavian Museum, which has it in its collection. From the Nationalmuseum website, the poster advertises paper confetti. It was commissioned in 1894 by England's leading paper manufacturer, the Bella Brothers. Paper confetti was a new product developed to replace confetti made from plaster flakes, which were banned in Paris in 1892 after several people were injured during Shrove Tuesday celebration, Mardi Gras. The Bella Brothers were interested in new poster art. During the 1890s, they organized some of the first poster exhibitions in England. The poster illustrated the cover of an exhibition catalogue of 1895. I don't know who the model was for this work. Portrait studies. Toulouse-Lautrec was a skilled caricaturist who used humor in some of his portraiture. And I don't know who this was, where, or what year even, but it looks like maybe a servant or an actor from a play. Here we see the fashion designer and milliner Renée Vert in her shop. She was married to the painter Adolphe Dodot Albert, and Toulouse-Lautrec had studied alongside Albert at Cormon's studio, one of the most liberal artistic establishments in Paris. The three of them remained in the same circles until the artist's death in 1901. The image of Renée Vert was used on this menu for a banquet held by the artist group Independent. The text on the Nationalmuseum website says, Divan Japonais was a music cafe in Japanese style. Seated in the foreground of the poster are the can-can dancer Jane Avril and the author and dandy Edouard Dujardin. Toulouse-Lautrec obviously realized that an entertainment establishment would seem more dazzling with famous celebrities in the audience. Nevertheless, placing the artist on the stage in the background and depicting her without her head may seem a remarkable choice. The Paris public, however, could easily identify her as the singer Yvette Guibert. The long black gloves were her insignia. Yes, indeed. And we will get back to Yvette Guibert later. These are photos of the three depicted persons. Edouard Dujardin was part of a symbolist circle, and he founded a magazine devoted to the work of Richard Wagner, whom he was a great admirer of. Jane Avril was indeed a dancer who used her inner feelings to express herself. She put herself in a sort of trance and danced alone as if in her own world. Toulouse-Lautrec connected with her and they became friends. And he obsessively, surprise, depicted her. And she was one of the few performers who appreciated his art. It is to him that I owed my fame, she later expressed. For way, way, way more info on her, I've made obsessive art about her. So I don't judge Toulouse-Lautrec. Or, well, the only times I judge is when his obsessions became creepy, like with Marcel Lender. At the opera, Madame Caron in Faust. The famous play where Faust sells himself to the devil in return for knowledge. One of few works where Toulouse-Lautrec depicts the Paris opera. Rose Caron was a French operatic dramatic soprano. In Faust, she played the role of Marguerite. Poulain, he was a singer. Here he is depicted on stage, but Toulouse-Lautrec's vantage point is from the wings, from the backstage. We see the orchestra and we see part of the audience. Poulin's specialty was military comedy. He also appeared in theater, as well as silent film. This work depicts the singer Anna Judic, who was a well-known performer on the Parisian music scene. Judic sang at the premiere of 3 of Offenbach's operettas and had a career which spanned over many decades. Toulouse-Lautrec shows her in her dressing room, together with a maid who is helping her with her costume, and the musician Désiré Dihot. I'm not sure why he or Toulouse-Lautrec is in the dressing room, really. Le Bon Graveur. The depicted man is Adolphe Albert, the good printmaker. Toulouse-Lautrec nicknamed him Doudou. He was an artist whom Toulouse-Lautrec had known since his student days, and here he shows Albert working on a lithographic stone. Albert was one of the persons who introduced Toulouse-Lautrec to the medium of lithography. The work is a sort of paraphrase of Rembrandt's etching self-portrait drawing at a window. Adolphe Albert was the husband of the hat maker previously shown, René Vert. Albert was one of the friends who tried to make Toulouse-Lautrec live a more modest and healthier lifestyle. It didn't work. He was one of the friends who came to visit Toulouse-Lautrec when he was in the asylum in 1899. This is a poster which was made to advertise the controversial novel The Queen of Joy by Victor José. The novel follows the life of a young courtesan who convinces the wealthy Jewish banker Baron de Rosenfeld to compensate her with money in exchange for her company. And the banker was loosely based on Baron de Rothschild. The novel and the poster showcases anti-Semitic stereotypes in the depiction of the Baron. I do not know who modeled for the woman. Here's a drawing Toulouse-Lautrec made in his youth, circa age 17. At this age he had broken both legs and they thereafter ceased to grow. He was unable to actively participate in things such as horse riding, but he loved to watch and sketch it. He loved animals, and horse riding was a family sport. The speed was something which excited him, be it horse galloping, fast-paced dancing, or bicycle races. Nationalmuseum has 8 different works by Toulouse-Lautrec in which he depicts the singer and actress Yvette Guibert. He made a whole album of sketches of her. Some of these are likely prints from that album. Yvette Guibert was well known for her stage performances in the 1890s. She stood quite still, wearing a light-colored, often yellow dress and long black gloves. She made gestures with her arms and hands and sang in a spoken word-like manner, songs which were full of double entendres and sexual innuendos. Guibert was far from the beauty ideal of the era. She was slim and had a stick-like figure. She made her long neck exaggerated by wearing low-cut V-shaped dresses. When Guibert saw Toulouse-Lautrec's first depictions of her, she said, "Make me a little less ugly. Just a little less." But she did appreciate the album devoted to her. Her first reaction was, "I'm delighted, absolutely delighted, and I'm most grateful to you." And she signed all the 100 copies. But many of Yvette Guibert's friends were not pleased by Toulouse-Lautrec's depictions of her, and Guibert's own mother even suggested she sue him for defamation. This book, named Natural History, is owned by the museum. The book includes text by Jules Renard and 23 lithographs by Toulouse-Lautrec. They all depict different animals, wild or domestic, but all to be found in France. It was printed in 1899, but he made the drawings in 1898, his main task of that year. He looked for models at his neighbor's stable and in the zoo in the Bois de Boulogne. And he ordered a toad from the writer Il Adam, and it arrived in a hat box. The toad later escaped out onto the street. The book wasn't a success, but it later became very sought after. Nationalmuseum acquired it in 2001. That was all the works by Toulouse-Lautrec I found in the collections of Nationalmuseum in Stockholm, Sweden. This presentation is not sponsored whatsoever. And that was all I had. And I did my best to get all the facts right. I stumbled a few times actually. Turns out there were several performers with the name Caron, for example. I hope the stories were interesting, and malheureusement, je ne parle pas français. Je suis désolée.